You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Check us out on social media. Facebook and Instagram, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, and on Twitter at Rainier Ave Radio.
Rainier Avenue Radio, your community radio station.
This is Cindi Bright, the host of Heartbeat Radio.
This is Paul Thierson, host of Star
This
Time.
is Paul Schneiderman today on the 73rd edition.
Hey, y'all, welcome to Travelers Guides to Venus and Mars and Syphilis from
The host,
You guys know me.
Your home for information about the impact of the
And
coronavirus.
amongst many things that's difficult about this virus is that it prevents
it's been
people from
devastating.
gathering. So
There are really heartbreaking stories of people who have.
There isn't anyone that isn't impacted.
shutting our schools down, including all athletic programs.
Your first-hand accounts.
I did take the test, and I'm proud to tell that I was positive.
A lot of people who know me, I'm still the first person they know.
But it was almost like you were patient zero for South Seattle. Your stories of community coming together.
Partner very heavily with Tacoma Urban League, who is doing some amazing work in response.
We're doing things for small businesses. We're giving out loans to small businesses.
And so I think it's very important that we have leaders who feel
I cannot tell you we're calling 20, 30, 40
this
members.
crisis in our community. We've been working to address it.
Rainier Avenue Radio, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
DJ Dirty John.
Karen Z with Rainier Avenue Radio.
Sergeant Cool. Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Rainier Avenue Radio.world. We got you covered. Local impact, global presence.
We broadcast. Welcome to Rainier Avenue Radio.world and our weekly coverage of the impact of the community. Continuation of our series. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us again here. And then again, now we are aware of the fact that we are and more focused on
Northwest Film Forum's Collective Power Fund is now open for grant applications. Grants are starting at $2,000 up to $10,000 for individual or artist collectives. The annual grant cycle focuses primarily on supporting art that incites public dialogue, pushes boundaries, explores genre fluidity, speaks its truth through an authentic perspective, and is often non-traditional, anti-institutional, socially responsible, or disruptive of any existing structures and conventions. Learn more and apply at collectivepowernw.org.
Rainier Avenue Radio.world is your 24/7 digital media hub. Tune in at Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and TuneIn apps.
You're listening to Heartbeat Radio. I'm your host, Cindi Bright. Heartbeat Radio is a conversation aimed to take the pulse of corporate America. Opportunities for people of color, we're getting lost in the shuffle of change. I'm that provocateur of change. The hearts of corporate America are addressed. Access and opportunities will be accelerated for all people. Through Heartbeat Radio, you will gain a deeper understanding of what is necessary for change.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Heartbeat Radio and Podcast. We're excited to have you join us tonight. We had quite the history making last Thursday where Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown was appointed. And it set off a whole myriad of us as Black women celebrating the progress for Black women and rooting them on for their success. And so let's bring in co-host Joy is here with me tonight. We decided, hey, Joy, how are you? Ooh, I can't, your mute is on, Joy.
I am good. Such a fabulous week last week. Go, Ketanji. You know, we say her name like we are a friend. We are friends with her, and she just lives next door.
We are friends with her. We got to all be sisterhood here and root and support for each other. And it got you and I talking about, we have some prominent, phenomenal Black women justices here in Washington State. We're proud to be able to introduce and host two of them with us tonight. Let me introduce Justice Helen Whitener. Bring her on. She is a Supreme Court justice here in Washington State. Hi, Justice Whitener. How are you this evening?
Hi, I'm wonderful, and I'm really happy to be here with both of you.
I remember the first time I met you. You are so spectacular.
Thank you.
And we do have, I incorrectly put her title on the flyer. We do have Bremerton Bremerton Municipal Court Judge Tracy Flood with us tonight, although she is not signed on yet. And I'm just going to make an assumption she's another Cindi Bright who gets challenged with some of these technologies, because this link is also very difficult on different
platforms.
And so she might just be fumbling her way through there. But I did speak with her earlier today, so I know she is planning on signing on. So we are honored to have Justice Helen. Do you go by Justice Helen or by Justice Whitener?
Whitener, Justice Whitener.
Your meeting got moved to after 8 o'clock tonight, so we got you in the first half of this. This is always the trouble with a live show, is trying to.
I know. I wasn't sure if I would make it, but when that happened, I was like, "Do you need me earlier?"
And yes. We just determined that 5 minutes ago. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear, first off, your reaction to last week's appointment of Justice Ketanji Brown, and we want to hear. Hold on, before we go there, Judge Tracy Flood just joined us, so let's bring Judge Tracy in with us too.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Judge Flood. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too.
I corrected before you signed on, Judge Flood, your title, as I had it published incorrect.
My fault.
I had to let our audience know.
You're just projecting. You're just projecting. That's okay.
I said, "Oh, she's a superior."
Yes. Can't wait for you to join me. Just project. I love it.
So that was my fault. That was my fault, Judge Flood. That was my fault.
It's okay.
I was trying to Google and trying to make sure. I wanted to make sure I addressed you by justice or judge or whichever is the right. And so I know how hard we as women work, we as Black women work. And so we want to make sure we honor what you have achieved and accomplished. So we are so happy to have both of you on tonight. And we were just starting to kick off the conversation to get your thoughts about last week's appointment of Justice Ketanji Brown. And so we'd love to hear from you before we dive more into you.
Okay. Well, before we go any further, I want to make sure everyone understands that Tracy Flood, Judge Flood, and I go way back to law school days. So it was an honor when Judge Flood was sworn in. I swore her in. So to be here with her as we discuss, the country's first Black female Supreme Court justice. I'll tell you, I am so tickled. I haven't stopped grinning. My mouth hurts, my neck hurts. It's just such a glorious thing, to see someone at the highest court that looks like me. I just love it. And she is brilliant. People identify us by our race and societal labels, but I want to make it very clear that this woman, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, is exceptionally, superbly qualified.
Yes, she is.
That first and foremost, she went to Harvard, both undergrad and law school.
Yes.
But what I really admire about her is with all of those accomplishments, she went and she did public defense.
Yeah.
Yes.
This woman could have worked at any major law firm.
Yes.
And she went and served the people. It was about service for her. So I'm extremely proud to say that, we have our first Black female U.S. Supreme Court justice. As a first myself, I'm at a loss for words, to be honest with you.
And more qualified than anyone else on that bench. When you look at her qualifications, more than qualified, but more than anyone else on that bench.
Yes. And we usually have to be.
I was going to say, being critiqued by people who don't even deserve to have a shot at in those seats. And they are, that was
Isn't that the path, though, of the Black woman?
Yes.
We rise. I think it was Maya Angelou that says,
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
We rise. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
How did you
Beautiful
feel,
day.
Judge Flood, when you saw that happen last week?
You know, it had been just kind of an emotional roller coaster, seeing and hearing the tones that were used,
yes,
and the questioning and the disrespect that came across. And having had my own race this last year. So it was very emotional to a point where I just had to tune things out.
Yeah.
But standing and knowing that you know that the unknown is feared and people attack what they don't know.
That's right.
And we know that historically, the African American woman, the Black woman, has always been treated as less than. But the emphasis in seeing her credentials, in seeing her daughter sit and her husband sit and look at her and honor her, and to hear Senator Booker's words spoken to her, to speak life into that situation. Because in essence, we know myself and Justice Whitener understand that there's certain things we cannot say. There's certain things we cannot do. But those around us can speak for us in areas where we have to remain silent. And
Tracy,
our silence isn't meaning you're incompetent or you don't have the skill set. Silence is a form of protest in many ways.
Ooh.
And that's all I'll say.
Okay.
I have continued to ask this question because I hear many Black women, many, and not just in the political space, but in any leadership space. I am asking the question, is it really fear or is it hatred? What's on display when you see, when we all witnessed the tone, you mentioned the tone, Judge Flood, and maybe if that's not an appropriate comment or question for you.
And here's what I'll say.
Okay.
When you know and have seen historically the strength of the Black woman, it's fear.
That's a good answer. That's a good answer.
And everything you've seen historically, when you look at everything from the bus boycotts on, and historically, when you look at the power of the Black woman, you see the power of the vote. A lot of things that we don't experience as much here in the Northwest as you see in southern states and on the East Coast. Being a member of the Tacoma chapter of Links, we're linked in friendship, and the historic relationships of uplifting one another is something that has power. And you see it in other elements, you see it in other cultures. So it isn't unique to our culture, but it is frowned upon. And again, I'll speak to my race, my political race, and saying you could see the power of the vote. The people chose. The people came out, they voted.
Yep.
So it is definitely one in which you have to be informed, you have to be educated, on this subject matter, and you have to want to be involved. That is so key, because there are so many that say, well, I don't have a reason to vote, but your power is your voice. So you think about wanting to silence Black women, you think about wanting to silence people and to remove their right to vote. All of those things come from not necessarily, in my opinion, hatred, but again, fear.
Yeah.
Fear of change. But it's inevitable.
Fear of us getting ahead. Stepping out and stepping up. How about you, Judge Whitener? Justice
Fear
Whitener.
that they have to live with the systems that they created to destroy us as Black women. Go ahead, Justice Whitener. I didn't mean to interrupt that question.
No, I'm thinking, as I heard Judge Flood speak and the both of you, and I would agree to a certain extent that fear is behind some of this. But when you are taught in school about different races and different cultures, and you have to remember, I was born and raised in a different country.
Yes.
Where everyone I looked at had some part of me in them. Black female judges is nothing special, you know. When I look and I listen, fear, I think that's the easy way out in describing it, because I think they know enough. So it is deliberate, and it's a little more than ignorance, you know.
Oh, that's good.
But it's a deliberate act.
Yes.
When you know better, you do better.
That's
but they know
right.
better and they don't do better. So therefore, I think it's more than fair. I think it's understanding the fear, but I think it's a little bit more than that. And I think it can be described a number of different ways. Envy.
Yes.
Because when you let us in, we excel, but we have to, you know, a misunderstanding of who we are. So that engenders some fear, but it also engenders straight up ignorance. Because again, these are not stupid people that are acting. These are people who understand and make a concerted effort to manifest their so-called implicit bias. Because I always say, I have never experienced implicit bias. I have implicit bias, but I've never experienced it, because to experience it, it was manifested. Therefore, it has always been explicit to the receiver.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit more than fear. You know, I mean, we're talking about years and years and years of mistreatment. So it's more than fear.
When I witnessed them walking out when she got, appointed, and we all got to hear the ignorance and the way that they treated her with tone, but the lack of respect and how they just walked out of the room.
Right.
From my perspective, it's way more than fear, right? Like I personally see it as hatred, that they just can't stand us and don't want to see us succeed, and are, to your point, Judge Flood, they are afraid that with us having power, shared power, we will get, I'll just quotation marks, stuff done to make sure society changes and make sure that all people prosper, not just some people prosper. Yes.
But I want you to be careful too. Hatred is a strong word, and I wouldn't use the word hatred.
Yes.
Because you have to remember, for Judge Flood, for Justice Whitener, for Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson to be where we are, it took some white men to allow space for us. It took some white women who got there before us to make some space for us. It took Black men who got there before us to make space for us. It took men of color who got there before us. And, we're always at the back of the bus. But at the end of the day,
we get there.
Be careful of the lumping of all of them into this group. So that's why, for me, I was very careful in saying they know better, but they choose to do
right
the wrong thing. So those that got up and left made a concerted, deliberate decision to act a particular way. But think of how many that stayed.
That's right.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
So we need to stop looking at those that leave. We weren't going to get help from them anyway. And let's concentrate on those that are here
Still in the room.
trying
Exactly.
to make space for us. I ain't got time to talk about those that left. They left. They out the room. They're not worthy of our discussion. So we could try and talk about something else. Let's talk about the woman and what she can do on the bench.
Yes.
You know, what she brings to the bench. You know, she's going to be joining a very conservative bench.
Yes.
But I still think her voice is going to matter. The sense of wonderful things. You know, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was well known for her dissents.
Yes.
I think we will see the same for a while with Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Yes. And I think that it's important to, again, even in my own new experience as a new judge, having, you know, students come in from the high school, from the Black Student Union, and for them to just smile and to just be elated and to for them to see someone that looks like them. And for us as women to see this historic moment. Because there is always going to be good and evil. There's always going to be the naysayers. But it's a matter of how do we handle it? How do we speak to it? And how do we be intentional in effectuating change? And the change came when the vote happened, whether they walked out or stayed in, it happened. It's done. And that alone will impact so many lives. And that's that change that, and I'm a Matrix fan, that inevitable change that no matter what we're seeing that's happening around the globe, you're not going to be able to stop it.
That's right.
So I chose the word fear. It's not in itself the only element, because there's always multiple elements. There's always multiple layers. And there isn't a one size fits all to solve any problem. But learning to adjust and to speak to your audience, again, her silence spoke volumes.
Yes. The grace in which she handled the fire spoke volumes. The power that came from her silence actually showed power. You know, it was just handled so well, so well. You know, and it tells you something about her judicial temperament, and that is why I think she will be even more significant historically than Justice Thurgood Marshall, and he was extremely significant. His times, he came through fighting the civil rights movement. He was part of that. He was, you know, very involved in that. Well, she was very involved in modern day civil rights movements. You know, the mass incarceration. She is very much aware of those things, burdening the marginalized populations with fines and fees. She was very much involved in that, understanding self-represented litigants and poverty. She understands that. She is not, even though she went to the most prestigious of the schools here, this woman was very grounded, you know, with the common man's experience. And something Judge Flood just said about the vote, I don't think people realize how significant watching that happened the way that it did, and having so many not vote for her, to me, it should have really and truly empowered the marginalized population to get up and vote. Because yes, it comes down to every single one counting. Because if they didn't show up, she wouldn't be there. But they showed up. And like I was saying, not all individuals with different ideologies or different sex or different color are against us, because even 3 Republicans crossed over because they saw the woman, they saw her work, they appreciated what she had done, and they gave her credit for it. So those that walked out, we're not even really talking about them, because I really can't tell you who they were. They're not important.
I thought another important piece to them walking out was it demonstrates broader than politics, but it shows, you know, if you heard my intro to the show, I started all this work in this show because of corporate America, because I'm out of corporate America. And it shows that the messages, the fight that goes on inside of corporations to advance Black women. Even when you've seen the most qualified person on the ticket, the lack of advancing her, the people who didn't vote, the naysayers, carry a lot of power, whether inside their organizations, in this case with Judge Ketanji, inside the Republican Party. And so it was a full-on demonstration of validating the voice of every Black woman who has been raising issues and saying, I'm being discriminated against. This is what I'm dealing with inside this organization, and are blown off. And here on full display. And I just wonder what impact that will have. Being that I work in that space, my business is what's in that space. And so it's going to be fascinating to watch. Will leaders now begin to get it? Will they begin to understand our cries for our cry?
Well, I tend to teach, and I teach a lot on DEI issues, diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. And one of the things I point out, just because something has occurred that is monumental, such as her ascension to the High Court, doesn't mean to say the rest of the world has moved just as fast. So some education needs to be done to move them there. But I also, when I teach, I point this out, and it really will require a rethinking of how we here in America look at things. If you have 2 individuals applying for a position, both are deemed equally qualified. One individual is a white male, he's been doing it, let's say 30 years. The other individual is a woman, and let's make her a woman of color, and let's make her a Black woman. And she's been doing it for 15 years. He's 30, she's 15. But remember, I started off by saying they're both equally qualified. And if I was to ask you who you're going to give the job to, everybody usually says the guy who's been doing it the longest, 30 years. And this is where, in my teaching, I point out that is a flawed way of analyzing the situation. Because you should be giving it to the woman who has less years of experience, overcame all sorts of historical, structural, institutional barriers to get to the point where she can be considered equally qualified as him, who's been doing it longer. So that tells me he's not as good. She is. That's the rethinking of how we need to look at these things. And not just in the court system, not just in business, throughout. We think the other way. We would say, oh, well, he's been doing it longer. And every time you do that, you're leaving a marginalized population out. We can never get caught up. But yet we do. So how come we're being considered less than when we accomplish the stuff in less than time than you did? So it's a rethinking. And we can use her ascension as an example, but the education needs to follow up and pointing out these discrepancies in the analysis that is occurring in determining who is qualified and who is not.
Exactly.
Look, I'm going to just ask us, can we take a quick pause, because we do take a station identification for 3 minutes, and then we're going to come back. When we come back, I want to pick back up. I want to dive more into your experiences as justices and what that is like, the kind of cases you're hearing in today's world. So we'll be back in 10 minutes here.
That up in Saks, I favor black businesses. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yeah. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yo.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not meeting Mrs. Jones in that cafe for a chat and nothing else, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Are you a small business owner in Seattle who was impacted by COVID-19? The Seattle Office of Economic Development is investing $8 million to connect small businesses to operating capital. The Small Business Capital Access Program will lower the cost of Washington State Small Business Flex Fund loans by paying down 25% of the loan principal. Eligible small businesses can borrow up to $150,000 with a 4% interest rate to cover expenses like payroll, rent, utilities, and supplies.
Mga kaibigan, ito po si Kuya Bert Kawili.
And this is Miles Salvador from Australia.
And I'm Norb Kawili, also known as Norbcam.
Kung gusto niyo po ang latest news and events from the Philippines at yung local Filipino community, Phil Radio po.
We play Filipino music and interview guests from all around the world.
And I'll keep you updated on the latest Seahawks and sports news.
Kaya always tune in. Phil Radio every Tuesday, 1 to 2:30 p.m. Pacific Time on Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
And in YouTube and Facebook. Salamat po.
This is your Rainier Avenue Radio.world community update on online Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. If you're looking for an AA meeting, find one every day online at aaphonemeetings.org. That's aaphonemeetings.org.
Yo, what's good? It's D-Money, and you should definitely check out Fresh Juice every Wednesday, 9 to 11 Pacific, right on Rainier Avenue Radio.
With pint-sized Patron, P. Tracy the Don, y'all be sure to clean your mirrors as we play brand new hip-hop and R&B from locals and worldwide.
It's ID Yourself, a.k.a. Malcolm Flex. Make sure you check out Fresh Juice every Wednesday, Pacific Standard Time from 9 to 11 p.m.
And to get those exclusive interviews that we be doing.
Sipping a brand new fresh juice every single week.
Yeah. Every Wednesday, 9 to 11, Rainier Avenue Radio. Yeah.
Atlantic Street Center has been serving the children, youth, and families of the Seattle-King County area since 1910. We partner with families and communities to raise healthy, successful children and youth through services including counseling, early learning, youth development, domestic violence, and education support for school-aged children. Committed to serving the African-American community, Atlantic Street Center provides services and support for all marginalized people. Learn more at AtlanticStreetCenter.org.
You are listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Don't forget to log on www.rainieravenue.radio.world.
Stacks, I favor black businesses. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yeah. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yo.
Welcome back to Heartbeat Radio and Podcast with my co-host Joy Stanford, and I are celebrating and getting an opportunity to host the Honorable Justice Helen Whitener and the Honorable Judge Tracy Flood with us tonight. There were some comments that came in on the feed that we didn't show, but I wanted to make sure to say these things to you, both as our listeners are paying attention to you. We had a listener who did comment and say they loved the analogy that you use, Judge White, when you're talking about the DEI. And one of our listeners also said that for the 30-year-old man that you were describing, he could have not been doing it right for the 30 years just because he was there. But your points are right on. These are the challenges and the way that we need to begin thinking about progress for people, because as you said, we will never get ahead if we continue to think the way of the literal 15 versus 30-year analogy. I wanted an opportunity for you all. I had all these notes about things that I wonder, the things that we read about in the paper every day. And so the type of cases that you all hear and deal with, can you give us a flavor for that? Give us a flavor for, are there particular trends? And particularly, I think what's on my heart is so much about mental health is out there now, and how does that intersect with a lot of the work that the both of you do in your responsibilities? So can you give us some insight as to what your day in the life of Justice Whitener, what your life is like?
Well, what I'll tell you before I turn it over to Judge Flood is you have 3 different levels of court here that we're talking about. You have the trial level court, and then you have the Court of Appeals, which is the second level. And then, of course, you have the Supreme Court, which is the highest court. So the trial level courts, whatever they handle, which is the everyday stuff that people go through, is then appealed either to the Court of Appeals or up to the High Court. So I'll have Judge Flood explain to you what she handles in municipal court. I was a pro tem in municipal and district court, and then I also was a judge in superior court. And then I can then come in and tell you how the Supreme Court would look at things, because the Supreme Court does not hear trials. We review the trial court record. So Judge Flood, you can start.
So I'll start with, I'm at the trial level and the city court. So for anything that's in the city of Bremerton, anything that's with any city district that has a municipal court handles the city municipal codes and violations that come under the revised code of Washington that are misdemeanors and gross misdemeanors. And a lot of what we see, and you mentioned, Cindi, mental health, and you see the direct impact. You see the direct impact that's happened with COVID. You see criminal, a lot of criminal trespass, a lot of thefts, a lot of malicious mischiefs. And from the standpoint of many just trying to be dry, to be warm. And it's a complex from the standpoint of, you say, well, aren't there services or things out there they can go receive help from, assistance. You hear in Seattle about the encampments. You see the encampments down in King County and Pierce County, and many of the cities, even up in Snohomish. But the surrounding similarities you see is in the bigger cities that are more diverse. You see the impact of services being cut, of the struggles of, if you don't have access to adequate medical,
right,
to have the medications, to be stable, to hold down that job, because we know there's a lot of get the medication to be stable, to hold down that job. You can't hold down the job if you can't have the adequate medical to be able to get on the bus to get to the job. Even though you may be given a bus pass, you may be trespassed against the bus station because you were found sleeping there. Something happened. There's so many moving pieces to it that we see a lot of things that can be addressed through behavioral courts, where there's a lot more services being provided, but it takes funding, government funding. That takes our legislator to be able to branch, to be able to acknowledge that these things are important, but also understanding that you have those that are reoffenders and habitual offenders, and there needs to be punishment. You don't always need to give a slap on the wrist or to give a pass because there's mental health issues, but being able to look at each individual defendant that comes into the court as an individual versus lumping them in and saying and putting labels on all of them is so important. And again, it's gross misdemeanors, trespasses, thefts, malicious mischiefs, assaults. You see domestic violence. And not only do you see relational domestic violence, you see family, children, parents, grandparents, caregivers. And you put all of that together, you have not only mental health issues, you have substance abuse issues that arise, and how you often see a person with mental health issues also having substance abuse issues.
Right.
And you can't address one without the other, which then leads to the homeless and housing challenges that those individuals may have.
I like how you're pointing out the intersectionality of it all and how it just drops down into your realm and your world at the municipal court level. I don't think people connect all the dots and see that intersectionality that happens. And to have someone like you on the bench who's like, what's going on? I'm seeing this. Okay, grandma's here, auntie's here, your next door neighbor, your best friend, and they're talking up for you, and your court worker, your caseworker, your social worker. I love it. Thank you, Judge Floyd.
And it's so important because you may have a grandmother raising her grandkids, and she may call for help.
Yeah,
but she's explaining to the officer, my grandchild has problems. She's trying to help, but then it gets even more complex because you then bring in the assistance that you're wanting from law enforcement. And then you build so many layers on top of that are unseen by the average eye. So it definitely is a need that we're seeing that has grown a lot over the years. I started as a juvenile rehabilitative counselor, but seeing the change as far as what's provided by government, what's not provided, what the needs are in our day-to-day court, it's compounded. It's not just, okay, sentence them and punish them. That's no longer the be-all, end-all.
Right.
I thought it would be, this is why I was asking that question, because I think it's so helpful. I don't know the court system either. And for us to understand how it actually works, number one, and then number two, why it's so important to have representation in a judge seat, to be able to understand the feeder issues that come into a lot of these issues. So,
right.
The reason I explain the three different levels of court, I have a very unique perspective in that I've been a prosecutor, a public defender, and I've been a judicial officer on all three levels of our state trial level courts. I am an immigrant. The thing is, the municipal and district court, as Judge Flood indicated, handles the misdemeanors and gross misdemeanors. They see thousands and thousands of people, and they see them at their worst. And the beautiful part about that level court is they're considered courts of rehabilitation. So in other words, they get them and they try to fix whatever the issue is so that they don't end up in superior court. Superior court is the highest trial level court. When you get there, the ability of the trial judge to empathize and sympathize is a little much different in how they can do it.
Yes.
Because Washington State is not a unified court system, which means every jurisdiction runs itself. You would think, well, the Supreme Court runs it. No, every jurisdiction runs itself. The other thing is, when you get to superior court, which is the felonies, what happens on that level is we have a Sentencing Reform Act, which means certain crimes have certain times based on prior history. So there's a calculation that goes into it. In the early 80s and 90s, it was very difficult for fairness to be achieved in our courts because a lot of judges didn't have the background of the people they were dealing with. So the state came up with the Sentencing Reform Act to take away some of that discretion from the judges, and now try and create this grid system that everybody should be treated the same, that equality thing. The problem is everybody is not the same. Everybody coming to the court is not the same. As Judge Flood pointed out, yes, you may be dealing with a mental health issue, but was it brought on by military service? The Veterans Court is where you need to be. Or is it a mixture of drugs and some other sort of mental condition? And then, do you have children? So then you have family court being created. Do we need to deal with this as a whole family unit? Because one or two parents may be subjected to either or both of those two things. So it's so many different things going on. And each level court is trying to address it. But when you move from that lower court, where they have tried or should have tried to address all your issues, and you get upstairs, as I say, to Superior Court, it is very, very limiting as to what the judge can do. But I'll give you one experience I had when I was a Superior Court judge. I get there and I'm covering a sentencing docket. The gentleman before me was a Latino male. And let's say the charge at the time, and it was a theft-related charge. The first guy that came before me 2 cases or 3 cases before him was a white male, and he had very similar charge, theft type of charge. He gets his charge, his felony, amended down to a gross misdemeanor. Wonderful. I love that. On your way. Have a great day. Bye. Stay out of trouble. Love to be able to do that rehabilitative work even on Superior Court because they amended it down. The Latino male, about 3 cases later, comes before me, same crime, similar, no prior history like the other gentleman, and he gets a first-time offender. Now, it sounds wonderful, 0 to 90 days, same as a misdemeanor.
Yeah, but
the problem is that's still a felony.
Yeah.
And there are collateral consequences to having a felony. So I refused to accept it. And the prosecutor was upset. And I said, look, 3 cases before, you gave this other gentleman an amendment down to a gross misdemeanor. What's the difference here? He doesn't have a history, a similar crime. Explain to me. Well, I didn't make the offer. Well, go find who did. And I had to tell the gentleman, have a seat. We'll get back to you. I felt bad, but we'll get back to you. His counsel figured out something's up. Judge Whitener was on to something. But remember, I had been a prosecutor, public defender, and a judicial officer. After checking, you know what was the difference? The difference was both men's cases were handled by 2 different prosecutors. So therefore, you ended up with 2 different results. That shouldn't be happening. What if I wasn't sitting there? The Latino man was going to be leaving because his counsel got a good deal for him. It's not a felony. It's a first-time offender. But the collateral consequences of having that felony. So needless to say, they amended it down to a gross misdemeanor. And that's what I accept. I wasn't accepting anything else. But that's why I'm getting around to what you got to initially. That's why representation matters, not just in our color and our gender, sexual orientation and stuff like that, so that we have similar experiences, but in our professional backgrounds as well. To be able to catch that and to be able to tell them, not happening, not today. That's needed.
I love that. Not today.
Not today. No.
There's no rubber stamping.
Nope.
Yeah, but that doesn't happen on that's not normalized. Can you agree with me, Justice Whitener, that's not normalized?
It's
changing.
It is changing. We're educating the new judges. Judge Flood just went through Judicial College. I'm a former faculty member of our state Judicial College. I now do the National Judicial College, but it's changing. And I also now chair the annual conference committee in regards to educating all judges in the state. I have to get my hand up in there. And I made it clear that DEI issues will be addressed in some form or manner on every class that is taught to judicial officers.
Yes.
And the feedback was, well, sometimes it's not relevant. It's always relevant.
That's right.
So figure out where it is you're talking about, and it's always relevant. And the day it's not relevant is when we have arrived, but we're not there yet.
We have not arrived.
No, not yet, not there yet. But it's about educating people. You know, we come back to fear, and fear is part of it. But ignorance is as well. And to me, the way you address ignorance is education.
That's right.
And after I've educated you, if you're still not getting it, you're getting left behind. We don't have time for you because it's clear you can't grasp what we're dealing with. It's too deep or something for you. And that's me not trying to call you stupid, but you know, it is what it is.
It's great. You know, I'm sure the public loves hearing this. This is highly educational. It's highly informative to have both of you speak and help us to see and understand what this system is like and how people, you know, the vote matters. Your vote matters, putting people in. Justice Whitener, are you up for re-election right now? Did I catch that? Are you?
Yes, I am. I got appointed April of 2020. Actually, it's coming up. Today was the day the governor announced me for the High Court, the 13th.
Happy anniversary!
I know. And that was 2020. And I had to run immediately. So he appointed me in April and I ran in May to retain my seat, which I did. But it was for 2 years because the retiring justice, it's usually a 6-year term. Justice Wiggins, he had only 2 years left on his 6-year term. So I'm up again now for a full 6-year term and hopefully things work out, you know, but I mentor a lot. And I noticed you had a slip of the tongue, as you indicated, with Judge Flood, but I mentor and work with Judge Flood. So if Justice Whitener does not prevail, Justice Flood might just be sitting here because you got to keep the door open, you got to keep training, and you got to make sure that pipeline is there. Because I'll tell you, it wasn't really there for me when I was coming through. But it's there now. And mentees like her, we keep making sure that we mentor others, other women, other LGBTs, you know, other immigrants, immigrant background, getting everybody ready to serve.
We have a question from the audience. A question came in and asked, what is the greatest hope for the judicial system? Do you both want to take a shot at answering that question?
Great question.
That is a great question. I believe that hope is in us knowing that anything is possible. And when we believe that and receive that, and we don't falter, because we set our own goals as far as what we want to achieve. No one else can define what success looks like for you or what failure looks like for you. And when you know that, anything is possible. So our judiciary looks so good right now. We talked about our U.S. Supreme Court Justice, but I met Justice Sotomayor 5 years ago. And even in her, I could see hope. So with Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, we know that there was this whole thing that began with the election of our first Black president. That was hope.
Right.
That was, yes, we can. So we can only go up from here. It's one in which you feel like you have all of those slogans in your head. There's no stopping us now. You hear all the old school music playing that motivates you to keep you moving, get you grooving. And that's what you need, because when young people, I grew up, Justice Whitener talks about, you know, her path in Trinidad, and I grew up in Chicago. So For me as a young person, I saw other people in leadership that looked like me as well. But it was when I had that one teacher, that one dream killer is what I call him. That white male who couldn't pass the bar, who had difficulty, who wanted to kill everybody else's dream. When you have those images in front of you, and a part of what we're required to do as justices is to be in the classrooms, is to teach our young people, is to give back. When we're doing that, we can only reach our ultimate goals, and that's what we set them to be.
That's right.
Thank you for that. And then Judge Flood, Justice Whitener, we've got less than 5 minutes left in the show, and we knew this was going to be a quick hour. And I know you have a back LD meeting. I want to give you an opportunity to answer the question, but I also want to give you an opportunity, since you are running now, do you want to just talk to our audience about what we can do to support you?
Yes.
Who are the people that vote for you? What is it we need to do? Tell us that so that the audience hears, and people now know we need to vote for Justice Helen Whitener.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Vote. Exercise your exercise
Mark
your
the ballot
voice at the ballot box. Vote.
So it's coming out of the entire state, correct?
Yes, I am actually the highest ranking state official, Black state official, because it's the only statewide race that, a Black individual is sitting in. So that was really even something I aspired towards, but it happened. The thing about hope, I want to share something. I got appointed in 2020, April. George Floyd was killed May, within 2 weeks of me joining the Supreme Court. When I joined the Supreme Court, it became the most diverse. I identify as a Black, female, immigrant, LGBT with a disability. So it became the first court in the nation to be so diverse at this level. Our court on June 4th issued a letter to the entire legal community, and it has taken on its own power. And the gist of the letter is to acknowledge that the devaluation of Black lives has been something within our legal institutions. That's right. And the charge we put out to the legal community, the attorneys, the legal commissions and committees, and judges is do better, look for it because it's there, and eradicate it, or try and minimize and lessen the impact it is having on marginalized populations.
That's right.
The beautiful thing about that is I realize, and I'm often asked, do you think that letter would have come out if you had not joined the bench? And I would like to think that it would have.
Yeah.
But I honestly can't say that it would have. The important thing is the judiciary is different. It is more reflective of the population we're serving, but there still isn't enough. After all, there are a lot of us. I come like Justice Ginsburg. I'll be happy when there are 8 more of me on the bench. That's not being crazy. That's just being real. She said it, and I'm just following suit. So mentor. But the thing is, we have to understand our worth. In 2016, I did a TEDx talk called Claiming Your Identity by Understanding Your Self-Worth. Yeah. Demand respect for who you are. Understand that you are not just here on your own. I'm standing on the shoulders of many kings and queens. Don't forget it. And I make sure folks don't forget it either. So demand respect, but remember, if you demand it, give it. Yes. There's a lot of hope that can be generated from the president that we had, Barack Obama. A lot of hope can be garnered from Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson.
That's right.
But look what happened after the first president was out of office. Mm-hmm. It's because sometimes we forget we have to work. Oh, we're in a post-racial, environment. No, we're not. There's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
So I always say, if you want to address the issues today, first and foremost, acknowledge that racism is real.
That's
and
right.
It intersects with all of the other societal labels that are out there. So racism is real. And if you're dealing with someone who doesn't understand that, you need to school them. It is real. We are living examples of the impact that has had on many of us in trying to move forward and in trying to live. I go by the title Justice. When I wear the robe, it's Justice Whitener. When I take it off and I step outside, they don't know that. So I get followed in the store just like everybody else. I get pulled over just like everybody else. Put your hand on the wheel, because I'd like to live for the next day so I could sit on a case with that officer, with, whoever it is.
Amen.
So just remember, the battle is not over yet, but it's a glorious day. So we're going to enjoy what we can with the justice, but there's still work to be done. Don't get...
thank you.
I can't thank... This has been one of the top shows we have done, honestly. It's been a powerful conversation. I can't say thank you enough. Both Justice Whitener, Judge Flood, thank you both for, number one, for serving, for the work that you do in our community, for you being that representative and being that person that we need to have. Here's a listener who says, enlightening conversation, right? Our community, and this is not even, that's not a local person, but people are paying attention to these conversations. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We're so grateful that you came on. To our listeners who joined us, Joy, thank you for co-hosting with me again. And to all of you who joined us tonight, thank you for listening to the show. I hope you saw that we posted Justice Whitener's website, because in any campaign, when they're running, they need money to win. So let's all get up there and donate to make sure.
And vote. Vote.
Thank you all. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We will see you next Wednesday.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Bye.
Sacks, our favorite black businesses. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yeah. Yeah. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yo.